In this video, I'm going to show you how to swap an oil pump on a 2000 Jeep Cherokee XJ. And this is going to be the exact same process for all XJs from 1997 to 2001. And if you have an XJ that's even slightly older than that as well, although it will be a different part, it will probably be a very similar process. So like I said, what we're swapping today is an oil pump. It looks something like this. It will also come with a pickup tube that ultimately kind of looks like a slide, and that slides right into the side of this pump. The way you tell your oil pump is bad is when you have no oil pressure. That has to do with either the pump or you have no oil in the system. So instead of pumping oil through your engine, it's pumping air, which can ruin your engine and is not good for anything. I'm going to take some precaution because I have no oil pressure. It's kind of intermittent at the moment. And I'm just going to put in an entire new pump because this thing has over 200,000 miles and chances are that pump has never been changed. Now this pump is actually located underneath and inside the oil pan, which is just the most convenient spot for it, let me tell you. And you have to remove the entire oil pan, which involves draining the oil in order to swap the pump. If you don't know how to lower or release your oil pan in your Cherokee, I'll put a video right up in the upper corner, and that video tells you how to replace the gasket, which involves dropping the oil pan. Now, when you do this pump, if you have not replaced the gasket recently or your gasket's bad in general, you're going to need a new oil pan gasket, which I don't know if you can see right now, but it's this blue gasket looking thing. Once again, that's in that video. I'll link right up in the upper corner. But you have to replace that gasket when you're replacing the pump because you have to drop the pan. Now, in order to drop the pan in a secure way where you can install the new pump and the new pickup tube effectively, you have to lower the axle. So one job has turned into 4. And by the way, I need this car to be ready for a video in 3 days. But you know what? You gotta live a little and buy a Jeep. Let's get going. This pump ain't gonna install itself. Can't even say that. So what I was able to do thus far was actually drain the oil and get all of the oil out of the engine, as well as drop the pan loose. So you can see it's kind of wiggling a little bit. What's actually great is the oil pickup tube can actually be flexed up. Once you have the pan loose and kind of hanging there and resting on the steering arms and things like that, you can actually reach your hand inside and turn the oil pickup tube and kind of wiggle it out of the socket that it's in, and it's easy to remove. Now, getting in the new one, you want to make sure that that's in there nice and secure, so you don't want to do that same process while putting it back together. However, when removing it, you can reach your hand up there and very easily just kind of wiggle it loose and pull it out the side. The next thing you're gonna have to take out is this bolt right here, and that is the oil pickup tube bolt. So that's a 1/2 inch socket, and that is the oil pickup tube. So this top part will slide out towards the back of the car, and then that bolt needs to come out first, which is a 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna take that out now. After you have the bolt out, you can just reach up there, kind of just wiggle it back and forth until that piece right there slides all the way out. I brought in reinforcements. By that I mean Tommy is reinforcing the pan so it doesn't fall. So there's one more bolt that holds in the actual pump because there was a long bolt that we took out to get the oil pickup tube out, and then there's one more short 12mm that should just be able to thread down, and from there the pump will fall. Like so. And the pump comes out like this. So now you're ready to install the new pump. There's actually a pin on the pump itself. So there's also a gasket, and you're going to want to make sure that not only you have the new gasket on the new pump, but that the old gasket is not stuck inside and that the old gasket came off with the old pump, because you don't want to double up gaskets. Sometimes that's okay, but not in this case. So this one's good to go. You can grab your short bolt, which will go in this side right here when we put it back in, and this is pretty much ready to be installed. There you go. There we go. So once you've installed the pump, you can actually get the oil pickup tube, slide it over the side of the oil pan, and then slide it into the pump. Now, sometimes, and by sometimes I mean most of the time, it's actually really hard to get that oil pickup tube into the pump. The reason for that is there needs to be no gap between that pickup tube and the pump. Then it picks up air instead of oil, and you obviously want oil pumping through your engine. So, especially when you install a new pump, it will be hard to get the pickup tube inside that pump. instead of putting the pump on right away, then you can also install the pickup tube and the pump outside the car. You just connect those two, and then you can tilt this oil pan enough where you can slide around the oil pickup tube and the pump, and then from there put in the 2 bolts that hold in both of those things. It can be challenging. I was able to do off camera the pickup tube into the pump and then slide it into place, because for some reason I didn't have the leverage to get the pickup tube in the right way. So ultimately that's 2 ways to do it, and one of those 2 ways will work. And remember that you want it to be a tight fit for that pickup tube into the pump. Ultimately it will pump air into the top of your engine and not oil, which will create low oil pressure. But once you have the pickup tube and the pump in place, now you want to strategically put up the oil pan. If you have a new gasket, now would be the time to put in a new gasket. Once again, there is a video, I'll link it up in the top right, and that's how to install the gasket, because you will need what they call some RTV, which is some essentially putty that you put on to help seal it better. So that gasket's very important. Obviously you'll have a leak if you don't do it correctly. So click on that video if you want to jump over to that now. Otherwise, you're good to put in the rest of the pan, which is just a ton of bolts all the way around it. Woo! Yeah, don't do that. Another thing to note would be that if your Jeep is lifted like this one, you can actually just slide the oil pan right out, because the only thing holding it back would be the transmission lines. And if you can kind of get those out of the way because they are flexible, then you can actually pull the pan out. Mine decided to fall on the floor. Hopefully yours does not do that. But that is a clean engine with a brand new pump. And that's all that matters. The best thing to do when putting in the oil pan is actually hand tighten them down with your socket, or what I call a spin tight, which is just a screwdriver that is an 11mm that would be the same size as the oil pan bolts. Now remember that there are 4 13mm bolts and the rest are 11mm, as well as a few brackets in the way as well. And like I said, you want to hand tighten those to begin with, get them all in place ready to go, and then go back and tighten them all down. Now if you're using a torque wrench, this can only be about maybe 7 foot-pounds torque. In the grand scheme of things, that's very light. So if you're using a ratchet and you don't have a torque wrench, I would go about 1/8 of a turn, maybe even less, and that is totally tight. You want it to be a little past snug. So once you get it snug with a ratchet, you pull it a little more, and that is about 7 foot-pounds. 7 foot-pounds is not that tight. However, if you have a torque wrench, I highly recommend using that and going around each one and making sure that it is up to spec, and that will ultimately be the best to prevent leaks. Now, if you installed a new gasket, you want to follow the steps in that video as well. And once you have all the bolts in place, make sure, of course, you tighten up the drain plug that is in the bottom of the oil pan so that you don't have oil coming out when you add oil into the engine again. And so make sure that is tight and you're good to drop the car, add the oil in, and then you want to obviously run the engine, maybe let it idle for about 30 seconds, a minute, to make sure that that fuel pump is pumping oil all the way through the system. And of course, check the dipstick, make sure that you put in the right amount of oil. If you have an inline-6 engine, which is a 4.0 liter engine, this is stock for the Jeep Cherokees, and a lot of them nowadays still have this motor running, which is awesome. That actually takes 6 quarts of oil. So make sure you're putting in the right amount of oil, and I believe it is 5W30 on this specific engine. So if you have any questions at all, just chuck them right down in the comment section. We'll do our best to respond. Obviously, we have tons of videos on this Jeep, so if you want to know more about what we call the Cherokee, then be sure to check out our channel or go to burnoutshow.com and you'll see that there's a fleet section where you can learn all about our vehicles. That was swapping an oil pump. There's tons of different tutorials that we've done here, and I'm sure the more will come in the future. Because as I say in every video, it's a Jeep. You drive it 10 miles, and when it has this many miles on it, it breaks down. I feel like it's been on this lift longer than it's been on the road, but you know, life with a Jeep is better than life without. That's all I got for this video. We'll see you in the next one.